Yeah. Well, I knew a lady who legitimately, she would go on walks every morning and she would just hold her phone up to her mouth and talk into the voice recorder.
Perfect.
But it was like her daily brain dump. And because she was daily and she specifically spoke about this topic to women, she grew a huge freaking audience from it. And again, like when you talk about like adding value and like, will it work? Like we have to define, what does it mean to say, will it work? Because again, is your goal to get large podcast numbers or is your goal to feed people towards your business?
Danny and Brianne, hello and welcome. So happy to have you.
Oh my gosh, I'm so freaking excited.
It's great to see you.
Yeah.
Great to see you too. We actually finally got to meet in person last week at Powerhouse Women. Well, when I was there for the trip, I was so happy to get to actually meet you guys after so many years of virtual friendship.
I had totally not realized that like we'd known each other legitimately for like 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, we've never actually met before. So it was cool to get to see you and get to learn from you.
We've now shared like chips and guac at a table, you know, so we've
it's a real friendship now.
Yes, this is like real life friends, you know.
Yeah.
So
once you know how tall each other are and you've actually like given real hugs, I'm like, it's official.
Yeah.
It's official.
Yeah.
We've seen each other from the shoulders down.
Mm-hmm.
Basically.
Yeah, not just what.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm so excited to have you guys on. Just quickly introduce yourselves to our audience. They just heard your bios, but I'd love just in your own words, just share who you guys are.
Take it away.
Ooh, ladies first. Okay. So I'm Brianne Hoefelmann. I know it's a lovely last name that I got to. Do you inherit your last name from your?
Sure.
It's
go
official.
with that.
Yeah, I inherited from him. I am a mom of 2 and co-founder with this guy of the Good in Media. Like those 3 things wrapped up are like the biggest pride of my life. Like I wake up and I think about my kids and trying to be like a good mom and not screw that up too much. And then also like stay close with this guy and enjoy building our business together. And I feel like I give myself a little more grace there because it's like, you know, I can make all the mistakes and learn lessons and grow there. But I mean, that's me in a nutshell. And also, side note, I'm super, super obsessed with New York City. So my people that love like good food and, you know, doing crawls around New York City for all the fun people watching and food, that's kind of my thing. But
love it.
She sounds all eloquent and like lays out like cool things about her. My name's Danny. I've been running essentially like this version of media for the last 5 years, 2.5 with another company, 3 on our own now. So Good in Media is a full service podcasting agency specializing in like done for you services where you have the conversation, we take care of the rest. So that's who we are as a company.
I love it.
And then, pride in being a husband and a dad, all that stuff too.
Of
Those
course.
are the top 2 priorities, but you know, she laid that out.
Yeah, not in order of importance.
Of course. And so because we got to meet in person, we actually got to have this conversation over dinner a bit. And I wanted to share it with everyone listening because there was just like, I just love this topic. I'm so passionate. I'm unexpectedly passionate about podcasting now. And I stumbled upon this whole world about a year ago. And as you guys know, I love it so much that we 5x the number of episodes over the course of a year. And thank you. And it's so awesome. And I wanted to bring you guys on because you're even more passionate about this this type of media. And I wanted to share with our listeners the tips, yes, but like all of the meat behind like what it takes to be a podcaster. We know it's all cool now, like everyone's starting a podcast, but like what does it take and what all is involved? Because there's a lot of stuff that they don't tell you. There's a lot of things that you have to be thinking about. And we were talking about that over dinner and I wanted to just like spill that into today's episode. And I want to kick things off with a question. In your opinions, guys, what are the reasons to and not to start a podcast?
Can I start with not to?
Yeah.
I'm going to go not to first. If you just think that you're going to become like a lifestyle influencer and just like monetize it immediately and like that's your goal of the podcast, walk away. Just let it be. Because I think that's something that a lot of people think right now is like, oh, it's just like this easy thing and I get to talk to all the cool experts and like everyone will love this and I'll like this will be my new job. And it's like it can become what it is, but it's not where it starts. And I think like if you're going to come into this and like really commit to something, understand that like you better have a reason why you're doing it and an impact that you want to make on the world. And otherwise like it's probably not gonna work. And commit to like at least a year before you even think about, is it working or not? Because you are going out into something where there are a lot of these, and it's really hard to measure your success against the people who are making a living off of it versus like, I just got started. I don't have a following. I don't have these things that like a lot of these people had when they were getting going or have built over 5 to 10 years. So if you're getting into it just for that side, hold off. So I would say that's the not piece. Who do you think it's for?
Ooh. Well, there's so many different benefits of doing it. We were talking about this the other night at dinner, some things that you just don't expect. But I feel like, I mean, podcasting is for people.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you go into it and like the same conversation that we had at dinner, if that's what fills you up and you love it, it makes all the sense in the world to have a podcast because the value will come after that. Like if you're leading with trying to actually connect with people, and I think it kind of ties again, like if you're coming into it and you're like, how quick do I monetize? How quick can I just like get through people? And you're not actually trying to like grow relationships. Like this right here, people, we know like it's the age old thing, like, or I say age old, whatever, it makes sense, is like people do business with those they know, like, and trust. Podcasting is a perfect way to create that relationship with people. They get to know you in this longer form conversation. They get to, you know, hear your voice, get passionate about whatever it is that you're into. And then, yeah, I mean, like we have a relationship because of like having, you know, talks online in the DMs, or now we have this podcast where we can sit and like, we'll feel closer after this relationship of talking to each other. So I think it's for the people who are those kind of people. And then after that, yeah, there's tons of strategy. You can look and say, okay, how can I offer value through my podcast? And then yes, turn it back to my business. And how do I grow my network in those kinds of ways? But I think it's for the person that knows that they will show up for a conversation with another human and show up as themselves and enjoy a conversation like week after week, day after day for the long haul.
Yeah. And I'm going to go there and say, like, the advice I've heard and the advice I've given is, if you're doing it for you, it's not a good idea. Probably.
Yeah.
It has to be done for somebody else, in the service of someone else. If you're picking a tile with nice pictures because you like it, or you're doing episodes you like, and it's like, but you're not the listener, you're not the person downloading it. Who is this for, and how will it add value to their life? And that's what you have to be focused. You always have to be customer centric or listener centric. And a lot of people can't get past the, well, I want to do this because I. And I'm like, that's not what it's about.
It's not about you.
Yeah. Well, and you can have the focus of, I want to make money and like make a living off this, but it's usually not going to come through this. And like an example of that is this is my second company I've been a part of building podcasting. And the first one, we started a company that was going to offer video services and podcasting and things. And we didn't know how to really get out to all the people. And we wanted to let people know what we did. And none of us liked cold calling. That was not our thing. So our value add to people was, let's start interviewing entrepreneurs here in the Phoenix area where we are, and we will just meet the whole community. And by the way, everyone will come in and know that those are the people that do podcasting. So over that first year, our big thing was, most of us are busy as entrepreneurs and we don't have the ability to just like go out for coffee. Like I don't have time. I'm sorry. Like I can't let you pick my brain.
Same.
But when I'm the producer of the podcast, I can reach out and say, hey, I'm the producer for this podcast. We speak to these kinds of people who are trying to learn about this thing. I love what you're doing with this. Would you be open to us featuring you and having a conversation about it? More than not, I just added value to the guest that's going to come onto the podcast. I'm going to get to create a relationship with them. And I really am searching for people who are serving my audience. And when I do that, it allowed me to also bring in like community. And like we never cold called ever, because enough people just knew who we were. And it made it so that when I left that business and I came over and started my own company, I was a producer of dozens of podcasts. I knew all the leaders. It's the best networking tool that has ever been created, because again, like none of us have time to have our brains picked. But if we can add value to one another, and then after this podcast, like, let me also create highlight videos. Let me create social media content. Let me give you shareable things so that they can promote it easily without having to create it themselves. There's so many things that can be done with this. And again, like it just makes it so that like when your focus is adding value to a community, you can monetize your stuff behind the scenes, but the value add and the things that you're giving back, that's what makes it actually spread. That's what grows the brand and the community and the know, like, and trust.
Totally.
Yeah, it's understanding that everyone that's walking around is thinking, what's in it for me? And not in a bad way. It's literally how we're wired. So like you were saying, as we're scrolling through looking at different podcasts, my brain, Brianne, is going to be like, this is a problem that I have right now. And so when I see something that solves that problem, ooh, there's something in that episode for me.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with the people you have on your show. It's like they want to, like, whatever it is that they're working on, like these are mini collaborations, like these conversations. It's seriously reaching out to another business owner and you're saying, hey, let's collaborate because I know you have this need. I would love to feature you. And I mean, you said it perfectly. It's like, you have to be focused on the guest and on the listener. Otherwise, if it's just on you, like no one wants to come listen to you do your song and dance about how great you are,
And your loyalty is to the listener, not even the guest.
Yes.
Because if the guest isn't delivering, it's your job as the host to bring out what you want from the guest so that you can serve your listener.
Yes.
Because you live and die by your listeners. And it doesn't mean that you should only create content that they like, because if you, the host, don't give a crap about it, you're not going to be consistent and it's not going to last. So you have to care about it, but have the listener in mind when you're making decisions around it, because ultimately you're there to serve them. And by adding value to as many people as you can, in the long run, you'll get what you're looking for.
Yeah. And if your podcast is a company, the listeners are your shareholders.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
It's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It's like, I feel like investor relations, and it's like, well, we have to make the listeners happy at the end of the day. I don't care what, and then like the customer is like the guest. It's like, we want the guest to have a great experience, but at the end of the day, we answer to the listener. And that's the biggest thing, because that's what's going to drive, honestly, that's going to drive better guests, because they look at downloads, they look at your stats, they look at popularity. And like at the end of the day, that's decided by the people who listen to your show. And they don't, we have to treat them like people. It's just like followers on Instagram. It's like, those are actual people you're talking to. So you have to give them a compelling reason to follow or listen. And without that, it's like, well, what do you think is going to happen? You need to make sure that it's always adding some type of value.
Totally.
So, there's all these statistics right now. We were talking about a little bit about this. These statistics, and we talked about this with Kacia on the show before, and that a lot of podcasts, it's like these crazy statistics that they don't make it past like episode 7 or something. And they like only X percent have a certain number of episodes, basically that they have a short shelf life. Why do you think right now podcasts have such a short shelf life? And if someone is starting one, how do they avoid that demise?
You want to take it first?
Oh, well, I mean, I have a few ideas. Like, obviously, the first thing that comes to my mind is we all know and have been guilty of this before too, where it's like the easy part is creating it. So it's like you can go on Instagram and be like, "Ooh, I have an idea for this thing. I'm gonna, sign up. I'm gonna get that make sure I get the @ with the tag or whatever I want on it," and then it sits there and it doesn't get used, because the easy part is that initial investment of okay, I have an idea and I create it. The true test of whether you're gonna like be successful is if you show up consistently. And so it's like anybody could launch a podcast, but like, are you going to show up even when you don't want to? It's like anything, like fitness or, running your business or, podcasting is the same way. It's going to take you showing up even when you don't want to record or do outreach or invest in a team that does those things for you. Like it takes effort.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, and to kind of speak a little bit to like the statistics kind of thing, like when people ask, is this too saturated? Are there too many podcasts? I still think podcasting honestly is in its infancy. And that sounds kind of stupid to say in our little world. It seems like a lot more people have podcasts because we're in like an entrepreneurial bubble.
There are so many people, Danny.
But to most humans, they have no clue what a podcast is still.
There are
and
so
like
many.
when you look at the stats, there's now a few million podcasts technically on podcast platforms. But when you really like break it down, they say that less than 40% of them have actually posted in the last 90 days.
Wow.
So you're not going against half the amount of people you think. And then on top of that, most of them aren't in the same category as you. So that doesn't matter. And then not all of them are putting in the same amount of production. So if you're actually someone who's creating the highlights and the social media content and doing YouTube and all that stuff, now you're in a different category of your own. And then past that again, you're back to consistency. Most people won't just keep going. And if you look at all the people who have these huge influences now, you look at, in our world, you have the Chris and Lori Harders, you have the Kacia Fitzgerald, you have these different people. They're years into building their brand. You look at the biggest people, the Joe Rogans and all those people, they're a decade into building their brand. So you showing up now, we can all get excited up front. Like one thing we see when people launch, usually there is a big spike in your downloads when you first launch because everyone's excited for you, everyone wants to support you. And then by episode 5 or 6, it's dropped off. That's your actual starting point. Those are the people who really were there to listen and weren't just your hype crew.
Mm-hmm.
That's your floor. Now we build.
Right.
So it's about what you do over the next 12 months that actually keeps it going.
And you mentioned like waiting a whole year to see if it's working or not, because it takes time to really register that feedback. And I think that people just want that. They want that instantaneous, result. They want something quick. They're like, oh, well, I launched the podcast and it didn't do 10,000 downloads, so I guess it failed. Like they just have this weird metric in their mind of, I didn't reach this, so it's not going to work. And I think that's what holds people back too.
Yeah. Well, and like Kacia probably mentioned this as well, because I know she talks about it just as much as I do. But like when you actually look at like the statistics of like what the top 10% get versus the top 50% and all these different things, everyone assumes that all podcasters are getting hundreds or thousands of downloads. That's like, no, like 50% of all podcasts never get 30 downloads an episode.
I was
and
shocked.
That's real.
I was shocked. We actually, when we were at dinner, I showed you my stats and you were like, Shannon, that's actually really good. And I was like, oh, that's not normal. Like we have no idea.
Yeah.
We have no idea.
No, you're pushing into that top 10% of all podcasts at this point, which is like you're a little over a year into like doing this and now adding more episodes per week. You're crushing it. But again, it's your ability to show up consistently and add value consistently, because so many of your episodes are very tactical. Here's how to do this thing. If you're growing into business and you're learning about this stuff, here's this thing that I can teach you in this short, condensed thing. That's so valuable to people because it also is evergreen. Like if I listen to a conversation between two comedians, I can be entertained and that's helpful to me, but I'm probably going to listen to it once. A lot of your things, like people, they can listen to it multiple times if they don't understand it. They need a refresher, but also it's the most shareable stuff to just say, hey, you're new to business. I learned this thing. Here's this episode. And it's tangible. Like all of us in this community are going to share it. And like, will this podcast ever be as big as a Joe Rogan? No, because it's not that broad of a thing. It's a niche, but also you are monetizing your business behind this, which means you don't want it to go that far out of the niche. It doesn't mean you can't. If Shannon decides, hey, I want to go talk to someone because I'm passionate about this and I want to learn, that's fine. But you're only talking to your right type of client. You're only talking to people who actually need what you are there to provide. That's the best kind of thing to do with this. So even if your numbers aren't as high as some of the like quote celebrity type people, who cares?
Yeah.
If it's the right audience, it's still going to pay off big time.
Yeah, it's like social media followers. We talked about this with Kacia. Kacia's episode was about monetizing and growing your podcast. And like we have to take a step back and go, but is growth really what you want? Because sometimes it doesn't have to grow for it to be successful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just even thinking about the downloads analogy, I feel like I need to tie in something that's like better. But to me, it makes sense to like compare it to like human years and dog years.
Oh yeah,
because like people they think of how many likes they get on an Instagram post, and so they're trying to compare like, oh, this is what I get over here on Instagram, and trying to compare that to their podcast that gets like 50 downloads versus they get a ton more on Instagram. And I'm like, how often do the three of us just like scroll through Instagram and just double tap because we love the photo and keep going and don't even read the caption?
Mm-hmm.
And we're already in the app. We're just going, double tap, double tap, double tap. It literally takes going to a different app to click on your podcast, to click on an episode to listen to you.
Yeah.
That one download is that's why I say it's like the dog ear thing. And like it's so much more valuable because that someone literally said more of this. I need this.
Yep.
Not because they mindlessly went by and just like double tapped it. Because sure, I'm sure they love you and know you and all that kind of stuff too. But like they had to consciously go to a completely different thing and had multiple choices in between, point A and whatever point B to actually like listen to that episode.
Yeah,
So it's so much more valuable.
They're spending 20 minutes with me as opposed to 20 seconds.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Well, and to speak again, why that consistency is so important, it's hard to get someone who already has their podcast that they listen to routinely, and then you launch and they're like, oh, cool, let me go support my friend. And they listen, and you show up week 1, week 2, week 3, but like life got busy and you didn't get something out week 4. You betrayed their trust. You know what they're going to do? They're going to go back to the podcast that they were listening to before. And even if you come back again, you're out of the rotation. People have allocated times that they listen. It might be when they're at the gym or going on a walk or doing the dishes or driving to work. And they already have a routine of who they listen to. If they trust you and say, I'm going to give you my time to be that valuable piece of information to me, whether that is to actually add education or just make me disconnect and smile, those are both value. But if someone's going to come in and they're going to actually give you that, don't betray their trust, because they let you take up that time slot. And the moment that you stop showing up, they'll fill it with someone else, and it's 10 times harder to get them back the second time or the third time. That consistency is what keeps them.
That's huge. Yeah. And I keep saying that. And I'm also convincing myself, because I'm a numbers person, right? I'm a metrics person. So I'm looking at the downloads. I'm looking at all the stuff going on the stats and like the chartable and like, ooh, what do I rank today? Like, I'm just such a scorekeeper. Yeah. And the people who are scorekeepers are dangerous because we love metrics, but it's also like
you're going to gamify everything.
Exactly. Yeah. But we love to do that. But then I go, wait, like this is a game you never win. So like the only winning is like quality and like experience, and the winning is actually enjoying the process. So I want to take a step back too and really touch on this, because this is a huge part of our conversation, was everyone who's out there, thinking they shouldn't start a podcast because we touched on, well, you know, it's saturated, it's busy, and like clearly there is a space for you. There's a space for everyone. There's a set of ears for every voice. But on that note, let's talk about the folks who are thinking, who the hell would want to listen to me? What would I want to talk about? And why would I be desirable to listen to?
Well, I'll start on that one. So we wind up being therapists for people because I think people legitimately, more than not, even people who, quote, look successful and all these different things, when they get to us, they're like, well, what's my voice matter? Like there's bigger people, better people, whatever. A lot of people have that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever heard of JP Sears. He's super political now, but he was the guy with the red hair that always wore like purple yoga pants and just made satire videos of everyone and like every topic. And like in the last couple of years, he's super political. But before that, he nailed the woo community, all the yoga video. Like it was the perfect satire. And we got to interview him. And in real life, he actually is like a performance coach, a life coach. He understands physiology and like the body, like he's brilliant in that way. But we were talking to him about, you know, what is more important, the message or the messenger? And his advice to us was, it's the messenger all day long, because there's nothing that you can say that hasn't been said by someone else, but it hasn't been said by you. And there are people that you, Shannon, can reach that I cannot reach. And I can reach people that you can't reach. And it's the same with Brianne. There are people who will resonate with how we say things in the time we say things. And it's our obligation, in my opinion, our obligation to show up for those people. And I think that's the thing, is regardless of like, if you think you're, quote, the one who should be doing this stuff, you're not going to develop into that person until you are just showing up and learning and being consistent. Like when you step into that person, you become that person. And I think that's a big, big thing with that, is like, if you have, again, we're back to that impact that you want to make, that community you want to build, you're showing up for that. It's not necessarily whether you think you're the right person to do it, because again, you're going to have some people that are attracted to how you convey your message, that even the quote qualified people, they can't reach them because they don't look like, what's the word I'm trying to say? So like some people look out of reach to me. They're not relatable. So you being 10 steps behind, quote, the qualified people means you're only 2 steps ahead of the people behind you. But that gives me belief that like, I may not be able to be this person who's way out here, but I can become this person. I want to listen to them. I want to grow with them. I want to be able to be there for their journey. That's the biggest thing you can do. Share your journey as you go. Let people see you grow. Let them see you make progress. You'll go so far with that.
Yeah, I love
like
that.
Very attached to that same idea of like, it's the Messenger all day long. We were I think it was at a mastermind recently. And the speaker was just talking about, like, they got up at the front of the room and literally like opened up and like, why are any of you guys entrepreneurs? You guys are way behind. You have less resources. Like, I think they used examples like Target, like, why would you open a boutique shop? Target exists. Amazon exists. Why? You're going to fail. And they literally got up and they were like,
wow,
why would you even do this? And then he was like, because Amazon doesn't have you.
Yeah.
You are the secret sauce of your business. And so, of course, like, he was starting out with this harsh thing of like, why would you even try to be an entrepreneur? Why?
Right.
And I think we do that to ourselves all the time. It's like, well, so-and-so has it more figured out than us, or they have a more impactful story or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, but you have you.
Mm-hmm.
And someone else is going to resonate with you and your message. And that's why you need to do this. If you are that person that's sitting there thinking like, you know what, I've had the thought to share this, or anytime I do share this in a one-on-one conversation or someone else's podcast or whatever, someone comes up to me and says, hey, thank you so much for sharing. Like, I appreciate you sharing your message. Like, if you're that person and you feel this like tug in your heart to be like, okay, well, like, I want to start a podcast. I want to have these conversations. Like, just like you said, you're not going to feel ready until after you've been doing it for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, that, goalpost is going to change. We're all seeking growth, but I think you just get out there and share that message. Like, you are the secret sauce.
And you're always going to hate your first one. So get it over with.
Oh my God.
Get
Yeah.
past that.
Nobody cares about the first episode.
Everyone's going to critique themselves harder than the listeners will ever critique them, for the record.
I got to listen to my first few episodes, guys. And like, just for the sake of it. But like, no, seriously, I used to almost like script out my episodes because I was so nervous, and I was like, what am I going to say? And now I'm just going, whatever, I'll just put the mic on and see what happens. And it's much more fun.
But that's a muscle that you built.
Yes, exactly.
Because you've been consistent.
Yeah.
Like, it's a totally different thing to step into a solo episode and teach something, especially when it's largely just audibly.
Yeah.
Like, they're not getting to see, and you're a freaking numbers business. So like, you being able to teach a concept with just audio, that's a skill. But like, it's something that you've developed and you're able to actually give to people now. So
yeah,
and that makes you a better speaker on stage. That makes you better on other people's podcasts. That makes you better when you're just connecting with clients, when they are in consultations with you. You learn to convey your message. You learn to convey like everything about it because you just learned how to do that.
Yeah. And you know what it is too, like from my experience now, number one, this was my barrier, was who the hell wants to hear me talk about accounting? All
of us who avoid our numbers for years. That too.
Like,
well, because I had that complex of like, who the hell am I to do this? I already knew about a couple of shows that were out there that were doing it. And I said, well, who am I to talk about it? Right. All the same thoughts that all of you have. Right. And then, I just said, I'm going to do it. And I also did it again. Like, the reason I did it now, I had the idea a year earlier, but I wasn't connected to the why yet. And I said, I want to do it, but I'm not going to do it because I want to do it. I'm going to do it because someone wants me to do it. So I had to make sure I was asking, remember on Instagram, guys, I kept asking you, like, what do you think? Should I do it? Should I do it? And then what actually hit home for me was I realized that I was getting so many of the same questions. I started writing them down. And then here was what the moment was that I just committed and decided to start the podcast. So if you're listening and you're like, not sure if you want to do it, this was my moment. And you guys tell me, I think I told you about this at dinner, but I sat down, my who is now my podcast editor, Sid, shout out to her. She's amazing. She said, I really think you should start the podcast. And I said, okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to sit down tonight for like an hour and I'm going to write down every topic I can think of that I would talk about on the show. Like, I'm just going to brain dump. What would I talk about? Because I was stuck with what am I going to talk about? How am I going to fill this much time? And that was like one episode a week, 2 episodes a week.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what would I even talk? And I said that about Instagram too. I was like, what am I going to have to say? And then I haven't like repeated a post to date in 3 years. You know what I mean? So I was like, okay, I'm going to make a list of all the possible episodes I could do. I started writing, went for an hour. An hour later, I had like 84 episodes. I was like, boom, 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 boom. And I said, well, that's like a year and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that solves that issue. So I sat down.
Yeah.
Like, okay, what am I going to talk about is not the problem. Do people want to listen to me? Well, we're going to find out. There's no way I can answer that question. but there, like, I basically one by one overcame all my own objections by actually just going and doing the thing. And I think that was the factor, was like, you can like hypothesize like, oh, maybe it won't go well, maybe it will. You guys were just telling me that like one of our friends bought podcast equipment, had it like 5 years, never recorded anything. Like, you just got to like commit and go do it. And you don't need equipment, by the way. Let's just dispel that myth. Like, you don't need crazy equipment. You don't need to have a plan. You just have to like know what you're going to talk about and show up and do it. Right.
Yeah. Well, I knew a lady who legitimately, she would go on walks every morning and she would just hold her phone up to her mouth and talk into the voice recorder.
Perfect.
But it was like her daily brain dump. And because she was daily and she specifically spoke about this topic to women, she grew a huge freaking audience from it. And again, like, when you talk about like adding value and like, will it work? Like, we have to define, what does it mean to say, will it work? Because again, is your goal to get large podcast numbers, or is your goal to feed people towards your business? Because we are in that day and age where I don't necessarily like to go support businesses. At least like, I'll go to a random Walmart, like that kind of thing. Like, that is going to be what it is. But if I have to invest in something and I can go to someone local and support another like person in the community, I want to do that. But I want to know who the person is. We're in the day and age where we want to know who's the CEO. What does the company stand for? What are these things? I don't get to know that with a lot of companies. But if you're the person who says, you know, I'm the CPA, which is like, cool, there's thousands of CPAs. What makes you different? Well, I get to listen to your podcast and I get to actually hear, A, that you know what you're talking about. B, what's your personality like? Do I click with you? And C, like, can I see myself actually like either learning from them enough within this that I can do it myself, or screw it, it's too much, but I now trust this person because I've been with them for 3 months, listening to them all the way along. It's that behind the scenes look at being the leader that can actually like do this stuff. And like, again, like that same person who had their stuff for like 5 years. And I was like, you have to do this. Like, what are you doing? And I like help them go. They never monetize by ads. They never monetize by like, you know, affiliate links or random things. Their monetization was, I have a book. If you want to support me and you got value out of this, buy the book. I have a mastermind. I throw events. I do it like, and it was courses. Like, it's anything that they can put out. That's how people want to support you, because they're already there to learn from you. So you may as well plug your stuff and get 100% of the profit than getting some little tiny kickback off of MeUndies ad that has nothing to do with your business.
Totally.
That's the monetization side of it. And to me, again, that's the big thing, is like, if you're there to build a community and add value to them, and then your podcast also happens to align with what you do for a business, it's going to come back to you. And it may feel like, man, the numbers aren't there in like the downloads. Okay, well, did you, sell a course this month? That was money, like that was the real thing. And I've worked with enough business owners to see that, like, I know people who run multi-7-figure businesses but don't have a social media following, and they're like, I just want to like have 10,000 followers. And it's like, do you know how many people who have 100,000 followers that don't monetize anything that would kill to have the real business? And everyone just wants the thing that they don't have.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, like let's define what a win is for you and figure out what that means. Because then you can also say, we may not know, quote, if it's working until a year in, but you will know, like, you're getting feedback along the way. When I say a year, I just mean commit to it.
Yeah.
Because it's going to take a long time for you to know that, like, hey, this consistency is happening. And like, I've known people that their numbers were very low. And then, like, I don't know what happened, but at 6 months, it just started to go. And like, there was no rhyme or reason, but it just, something resonated with people. It started getting shared. And because they had already done the work to have this large backlog of like value that they added, everything started going up. And I see that a lot. So it really is just that, like, know that, like, if you went viral today, what benefit would there be to that if you don't have a catalog of work behind you or a way for people to support you? You have to start building that.
Yeah. And I'm gonna direct this one to Brianne too. The one thing I always see is people who start podcasts but don't realize how much you have to keep pointing to it, that people don't just know you have it, that they're not searching for it. You need to point people to it, because I've noticed that in order to grow this show, guys, literally I talk about it every day on Instagram, every single day I tag Keep What You Earn on Instagram and I tell you to come listen to the show. And that's what, like, I have to. There's a lot of folks who start a podcast and go, I have, just like any other product, I have put it out in the world. Everyone must know about this and they're going to come and find it. Go ahead and react to that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. How many stories have we heard of people who are like, I created a website, it exists. And they just, then they wait and they sit there and they're like,
yeah,
all my consultations are going to come in. This is great. I have a website. Like, did you tell anybody that it exists? I mean, it's the same thing. And you always have to be promoting it, especially when you look at, social media. And I'm not good at knowing the percentages, but somewhere between, I don't know, like for sure less than 10% of your following will see any individual post. So when you think about that, you're okay, your whole following all together, not every single person that follows you sees every single one of your posts.
Right.
So there's that factor. Always be talking about your podcast. Then once you're continuing to do that too, how many times, I mean, there's like all kinds of stats. What is it? Like 11?
Like how many times you have to see something?
How many times you have to introduce, like in sales before someone says yes. You are selling your podcast. Like you want someone, again, to go over to that other app and say yes to you and click on an episode, or to say yes to clicking subscribe. And you just have to put yourself in front of people over and over and over again. I mean, like I love using myself as an example because I'm like, I'm totally guilty of this. I know someone's event's coming up and I'm like, oh, that would be fun. And then I don't immediately, the first time I see it, grab a ticket, typically. I need to see them talking about it over and over and over again before I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. It's time for me to go do this. And so, I mean, always be talking about
on that stat too, the stat of like people have to see it so many times. Like the stat used to be they have to see it 7 times. And I've seen the study. So half of stats are made up on the spot kind of thing. But like I've seen multiple studies now that have said that because we see so many ads now on our phones, on billboards, on TV, you name it, like that number has gone from we have to see something 7 times to the range I've seen now is 20 to 40 times.
Wow.
And it's just, you just have to keep showing up because again, even if someone else has already like seen it, who cares? If they see it twice and they know it's for them, good. You're retargeting them.
Right.
If it's not for them, they weren't going to go anyway. So who cares? Just keep showing up.
Yeah. And I think we worry too much. I think the thing we're actually thinking is like, oh, I feel like I'm a broken record. I'm coming on and saying this all the time. And it's like, you have to get past that.
Yeah.
Like you have to be able to push past that feeling. Cause one, nobody really cares. Like everyone else that's like, scrolling around or they're in their world thinking about themselves and what's going on. I mean, no one's thinking, oh, Brianne just went on another freaking podcast talking about podcasting. Like no one's going to think that. Yeah. And the person that needs this conversation is like, ooh, cool. Like more people to connect with or to learn from or whatever. So like it all sorts itself out. If there is somebody that's thinking that and be like, oh, she's out here talking about her business again. I'm like, great. We're not meant to be in each other's worlds. Like you continue on, enjoy. So it's like, I think we have to just recognize we're giving too much weight to what other people think about ourselves. And I think that's where it ties back to you saying like, I need to have a why. Like this has to be for somebody else. Mm-hmm. Because if this conversation was about us, like, then it doesn't really matter. And I'm not going to want to continue to show up consistently in anything, honestly, if it's just for me.
Exactly.
But if I know that somebody else needs this conversation, whatever it is, like, we love podcasting. We also love talking about relationships and things that like really freaking matter to us. Like there's somebody else out there that needs to hear that from me or from you or from Danny. And so when you have that in your mind, then I'm less fearful, still a human, but less fearful of showing up and sharing my story because I'm like, oh, I someone that I may not even know yet needs to hear it. Mm-hmm. And then it's not about me anymore.
Yeah. Oh my God. I totally agree with that. And it's always having the listener in mind. What do they need from me right now? How can I show up for them? And then they'll show up for you. And you guys mm-hmm. brought this up with the social media analogy. And I'm just thinking like, how many people do we follow? Like on social media, like how many people I follow? I probably follow 500 people on Instagram, mm-hmm. 600 people.
Yeah.
And then the average person, I think the stat was like listens to 7 or 8 podcasts. Yeah. Look at that fraction. Like I consume 1/500th of Shannon's feed versus I consume 1/7 of her feed. that like you have much more real estate as a podcaster in the person's ear, literally, but also in terms of duration of the episode, time with that person, and the fact that their attention is divided by fewer things in a podcast app. Because I think when, if you maybe can relate to this, when I'm following more than 10 shows, I get like overwhelmed. Because I'm like, oh my God, there's too much stuff. There's too much stuff. I'm so behind. I gotta like, I'm not even listening to these anymore. I gotta like unfollow. Because I want to like clean up the feed. And I never do that with Instagram, right? Like just keep scrolling.
Right.
But like the podcast, I'm like, no, I have to curate like my 10. It feels like my new MySpace top 8. Like, you know what I mean?
Basically.
Like,
it's a good way to look at it.
It's like, no, I have to like, these are the ones I really want in my zone. So it's a huge compliment when someone follows your podcast. And my whole thing is, and I want to just give some parting words of advice for those who are aspiring podcasters. Like my whole thing is, it's the same tagline that the Pan Mass Challenge uses, which is a bike ride we do up in New England. And it's a shirt that I have. And it's one of my favorite sayings ever, which it says, commit, you'll figure it out. And that's like my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Has been my approach this entire time. But what are some of your pieces of advice for folks who are thinking about starting?
Just start.
Mm-hmm.
Start messy. Just do it. Show up. Do exactly like you have, and show up to your audience regardless of size. I don't care if that's like your 2 best friends. I don't care if it's your people on social. But just talk to them and ask them what they want. And then, even if you're recording and nobody's listening and nobody's watching, you'll continue to refine your message as you go. And eventually then people will show up and they'll start listening and they'll start giving feedback and they'll direct you where to go. They'll tell you, I'm sure you have this, like people will tell you what they want from you.
Yep.
Because you are showing up consistently. They know you're out here answering questions on the daily. So then when they do have a question, they know they can come to you. So just start messy.
I agree.
Yeah. My random like addition to that is just that, again, if you have something that has been like weighing on you that you feel like you should, eventually, if you don't do it, you're just not proud of yourself. And then mentally things just start to suck. And I say that very much from experience. You know, I know we'll talk again, but as someone who has dealt with a lot of mental health things, when I share that message that has been weighing me down, my shoulders are lighter. I feel better. And not to mention, I wind up having amazing conversations with people who are like, hey, me too. I'm so glad someone was willing to talk about that. So again, if you are the person who's like, I feel like I should have these conversations. I feel like I could make a difference. I could do these different things. Do it, because you won't even realize like the amount of people that you're impacting, where I have people who I've talked about sensitive topics before, and like we're talking years ago, and they come out of the woodworks and are just like, hey man, like I've been thinking about this thing that you said 4 years ago. They didn't acknowledge the post. They didn't acknowledge anything, but they've been watching the whole time and just seeing how things go. You have no idea the impact that you're making. So if you feel that you should make that impact, go make that impact.
I love that. I love that too. And, you know, again, doing it for others, doing it also for yourself. You can be a little selfish. If this is something that's on your heart and you want to do it, go for it. Thank you guys so much for being on. We're going to unpack even more because I want to hear, we're going to have these guys back on because we're going to hear about how you guys are running your business together, your relationship, you know, how a husband and wife duo can just crush it in this space, and just like all the stuff that comes along with that, because I think that that's so interesting for entrepreneurs to hear. So stay tuned because we're going to unpack even more of that with these guys. Brianne, Danny, thank you so much for jumping on the show. I always appreciate spending time with you guys.
Oh my gosh, likewise. We were super excited. So excited to be back too.
All right.
Thank you so much. And congrats on all the things you're doing, because you are doing so much for so many people. So
thank you so
keep
much.
doing it.
And thank you all for listening. You guys make this possible. So until next time.